Welcome to another episode of Legend FM Mix, where I get to sit down and talk with some game, doing all sorts of cool things. This afternoon, it's a bit of an early session today. Sitting down with Nunia Moko, who is so. I've been telling everybody that I'm going to be talking with a reptologist. I got corrected today. There's no such thing as a reptologist.
Herpetologist.
Herpetologist. So, what is a herpetologist?
So, a herpetologist is someone who studies frogs, lizards, and snakes.
So, specifically frogs, lizards, and snakes.
Yes.
Lizards are it's not the study of reptiles per se, it's a study of those three.
Of those three things, yeah.
Ah, cool. And then, okay, I want to ask a question, and this might come across as a bit insensitive, but why those creatures? They're not the.
That's a very good question, because I didn't know I was going to go into this field at all.
Yeah.
It's something that I came onto, I think, accidentally, but I like to think that it was God's will that I came into it. I was given an opportunity when I was a graduate. Once I graduated from university in 2002, my group of friends, we won an award to study frogs in Fiji. We have some pretty special frogs, the Fiji ground frog and the tree frog. And we were to study the ground frog and see whether they still existed, what islands they were on. So we were interviewing Ngau and Viewer Island. And I realized that, I didn't mind touching them. Well, the first time I went for a frog survey, I was in my third year in university. I didn't even know we had special frogs. All I knew was the cane toad, which we have around us.
Yeah.
And we went to this island viewer in Tay level, and our lecturer said to us, let's go out and look for ground frogs. And when we saw the frogs, I was chasing them so that someone else would catch them for me, because I didn't want to touch them. Even for the lizards, I was scared of them, so I had to overcome my fear to handle them. But I had an opportunity. I was given a scholarship to do my master's either on cloud forest, which is another special system in Fiji, or on the frogs. And I had written up my research proposal for the cloud forest. When I submitted it to our supervisor at the Institute of Applied Sciences, he said, why aren't you doing something on frogs? You've been spending almost 2 years working on frogs.
Chasing after frogs.
Yeah, and then I realized, oh my gosh, that's actually what I'd like to do. And my supervisor became my best friend, Dr. Claire Morrison. She wrote the book on Fiji's herpetofauna.
Literally wrote the book.
Wrote the book, collecting all the data and all the information from many other people. And then we realized that Fiji's frogs, lizards, and snakes are quite special.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're quite special. Some of them are found only in Fiji and nowhere else in the world.
Okay, sorry, just to go off track a little bit, because you mentioned we were talking about the frogs, lizards, and snakes, but you also mentioned cloud forest. I came across that in one of my kids' textbooks. What is a cloud forest?
So a cloud forest, if you think Mount Korombamba, Monasavu Highlands, these are forests at the mountain peak, and you'll see them covered in clouds. And they have special...
So it's literally cloud forest.
Yeah, and they have special plants in there. And their role is to basically, when the clouds come over and they stay there, it's so cold in there that they condense, and the cloud turns into water. And then all that water trickles down, and that's what's feeding our river systems. So if we lose our cloud forest, we lose our river systems.
Wow. Okay, I'll go back to what you actually do now. What do you like? What does one actually study to become?
So my program that I studied at USP was environmental science.
Right.
It's a biology focus. I think the main thing that was in my environmental science program was that it is a combination of biology and geography, which is called biogeography, because geography is where places, and then the biology in those places. And you just start to get curious. Why is the lizard there and not there? Like, for example, for the crested iguana, why are the crested iguanas only on Nyando Tamba, like the western part of Viti Levu and Fiji, but not in the eastern part of Fiji? In the eastern part of Fiji, you have the banded iguanas. So how did they get here? And then you think, okay, where else in the Pacific do we have iguanas? Nowhere. It's only in Fiji.
Seriously?
And then you think, okay, what's the closest relatives of the Fiji iguanas? They're in the Americas. They go, but how did they get here?
Right.
So, like you keep
It's
asking.
a mystery.
It's a mystery, and it baffles biogeographers because, like, through biogeography, we go, logically, the iguana should have come. Should be from here because our species, they come from where they're related to Papua New Guinea,
right.
the Solomons, and they traveled this way.
Yeah.
But the iguanas came from this side, from the east, and they came to Fiji. And Tonga has an extinct species of iguana, and Fiji. So it missed all the islands between Tonga and the US coast, and it's here in Tonga and Fiji.
Has that
and
mystery
then beyond Fiji, there's
Nothing.
no iguanas.
So has that mystery been solved, or is it?
No, it's still like,
Seriously?
maybe there was a freak event that where the tides changed or something, and it allowed some iguanas to come this way. And so then there are scientists who look at, okay, how are the crested iguana, the banded iguana related to each other?
Wow.
And then even then on the islands, like Ngau has its own iguana. The banded iguanas, there's some banded iguanas that are Vitilevu, Wanoilevu, and Kandavu. There's the Lau iguanas, there's the Ngau iguana, and then there's the crested iguanas.
So how many types of iguanas do we have in this country?
So we have four different types of iguanas. So one of them is the crested iguana, which I've got here as my earring.
Cool. So there's the crested, the banded. How about those big ones, the really big ones?
So we have the crested iguana that lives in the dry forest.
Right.
And then we have the banded iguanas. They live in the wet forest, in the small islands, Vitilevu, Wanoilevu. The three banded iguanas can be split into 3 different species, right? I think the one that you might be talking about is the one that was introduced into Fiji. That's what we are calling the giant invasive iguana.
Right.
It's called a green iguana or iguana, and that came in from South America.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you study snakes. One of the things I wanted to ask you about snakes is a lot of people find snakes a bit like icky and all that kind of thing. As somebody who works with them, how would you go about reassuring the Fijian public at least? Because what I know, our snakes aren't venomous.
No, they're not venomous.
So how would you go about educating?
Well, one of the things is that our snakes are pretty special. They're found only in the Pacific, and they're boars. They're not.
Oh, right.
Those kind of snakes that think. So they're boars. They wrap around and they squeeze and then they swallow their prey. And I think that snakes and reptiles are just misunderstood or a little understood. And I think that our Christian upbringing with the serpent.
Right, the symbolism there.
Yeah, symbolism there affects it. But if you look in all the Fijian stories, there's the snake god and all that. So, I think that in the Pacific or even in Fiji, especially, we had snakes. We have snakes and iguanas and lizards as our totem. So we have a close relationship with them. And I used to think that, every Fijian was afraid of lizards and snakes, but there are some who are not,
Yeah.
I was one of those that used to be afraid of it until I started studying them, and they're just little understood.
Is much effort spent in studying like the household lizard?
The household lizard? So a lot of the household lizards that we have, especially in the urban area, are the introduced ones. They came in from outside, from South America and other parts of the world. A lot of our native lizards, like the green skinks. So you have skinks and you have geckos. The geckos are the ones that walk around, that roam around at night, and the skinks are the ones that are around in the daytime. So if you, in the cassava patch, you see some striped skinks running around. So those are skinks. You see their skin is more...
Oh, that's what they call skinks.
They're called skinks, and then the geckos are the ones that you have in the house, or sometimes a tree bark, if you peel it up, and there'll be a gecko there. So a lot of our native geckos are only found in the trees or in the forest or in houses that are far away from urban areas. A lot of the geckos that we have now are the
Because I was about to say, because I live like near like Mount Korombaba and all that kind of thing, and we've got some really big lizards at home with a greenish tinge to their skin, and they come in the house, but they're very shy at night.
Okay, so those are geckos, and there's probably Gerharia oceanica, which is a native
big,
gecko.
man.
And yeah, they eat moths, and so they help with controlling your insect population.
Well, that's like the first time I saw them, I kind of freaked out, but I realized that they're very shy creatures.
Yeah, they are.
Ah, so snakes, lizards, and frogs are classed as reptiles?
Yeah, so the snakes are reptiles.
Snakes are reptiles.
Snakes and the skinks, and then the frogs are amphibians.
They're amphibians.
Yeah.
Oh. And you were saying, you mentioned something about like, we've got some pretty special frogs in Fiji. That, again, like...
Okay, so we have the Fiji ground frog and the Fiji tree frog.
Right.
So the tree frog lays its eggs in the axils of trees, like in the voi or the wame. They lay their eggs in there, and the ground frogs, they lay their eggs in rotting wood. The cane toad lays its eggs in puddles of water, and they lay up to 30,000 eggs at one time. That's the yield. But with our frogs, they lay their eggs in there, and then they don't have a tadpole stage. They come out, they emerge as tiny frogs.
Tiny frogs.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you only find them, where there's good forest. So they're an indicator of the health of your forest. If you're finding tree frogs in your rivers, like in the trees beside the river and all that, then it's a pretty good indication that your forest is healthy and that the water is good.
As a herpetologist, what do you think of cane frogs? Are they a pest?
Well, when I was doing my master's my master's was on Viewer Island, and it was looking at how they were interacting with each other, the cane toad and the ground frog. Like, were they using the same habitat? Are they all under the ivy tree or in the plantation, or what habitats are they, or in the bamboo area? And I found that for one frog, there were like hundreds of toads.
Yeah.
That's the ratio.
Right.
Yeah, so the cane toads can just pretty much dominate the system. And we had a scientist who was visiting one time, and he was dissecting the toads, and he found a ground frog in the toads. So you know that they eat them.
So cane toads eat what?
Cane toads can eat anything. Like they eat their pet food and all that. And that's why it's such a huge problem in Australia.
Right.
Where because they have native snakes in Australia, and their food is frogs.
Right.
Right? And they don't know the difference between a frog and a toad. And so they're eating it, and because they're eating it, they're dying because it's poisonous.
You mentioned about ground frogs being an indication of a healthy forest. That's what I want to ask you. So lizards, snakes, and frogs, how important are they to any ecosystem?
They're part of a bigger ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it's just like asking, what's the importance of trees? Because in an ecosystem, like I said, you've got the cloud forest, right? And what helps the trees, if you lose the cloud forest, you lose the water in the river. Okay, what are the things that are associated with a cloud forest? What helps those trees being there? Bats and birds, right? They eat the fruits, and they drop the fruits around, so that helps us get more things. And then the insects, the bees and other birds that feed on nectar, they help with the pollination. And so it's all related. And when you're losing one of these things from the system, then you know that something is wrong.
Something's going to become imbalance.
Maybe it's a predator that's there. So like on Viti Levu, the only place on Viti Levu where you can find ground frogs is the Nakovandra range.
Wow.
For a long time, the scientists thought that there were no more ground frogs on Viti Levu and Vono Levu. They'd all become extinct because of the mongoose and the cats. Because mongoose, cats, dogs, cows, horses, all these mammals are all introduced. We all brought them with us. And some of them became predators to our native wildlife. So for Viti Levu, the only place where you can find the ground frog is in Nakovandra. In Vono Levu, there are many places you can find the ground frog. And so, and I think there's one frog called the Megambotoniviti, which has gone extinct. It was quite big,
So how big would it have been?
Mega means big. Like the image that we've got is of it eating a rat. So you can imagine how big that. Yeah, they found bones, I think, in the Voli Voli cave many years ago.
Wow.
We had a tortoise that's gone extinct.
Yeah.
We had crocodiles that's gone extinct. They found all we have is bones of these. We had big birds, these big megapods.
But what? Did they go extinct because of human encroachment?
Yeah, they were eaten to extinction.
They really just go over and just do nothing but cause trouble, man. So, you mentioned that you've been with Nature Fiji from you were pretty much the first employee. I'm assuming that back then you were just you were going out into the field a lot. Do you still get out in the field a lot now?
Yes, thankfully with
Wow, okay.
with Nature Fiji, it's that type of organization that that always requires that everyone is out in the field, and also because I need to be out in the field.
Yeah.
I find it fulfilling and peaceful. Like just sometimes you just need that break from urban life and just going out and camping in the forest.
So you guys would go in camp?
Yeah, we got camping. So we're all part of this bigger group of local scientists, and I was really fortunate. I was one of the 5 that got a scholarship. So I studied frogs, lizards, and snakes. So I did my master's on frogs. Another of my colleagues, he did his on plants. Another colleague did birds.
Okay.
Yeah, another did, he did birds and bats. One of my friends from the Solomon Islands did his on the freshwater fishes of Fiji. And so we're part of this team that usually goes out and we assess the biodiversity or the wildlife in a particular area. And then based on the data that's brought up, then we recommend it to the Ministry of Forestry or Ministry of Environment. Look, this area has some really special plants and animals. We should look at how we can manage it better.
So, what do you like aside from your professional interest as a scientist in these 3 species or whatever? What do you think about frogs, snakes, and lizards? Like, do you, or is it just? Are you like a dispassionate observer all the time, or do you, I don't know, have feelings for them?
I think I think that they are something of value. Like for me, for a long time I was in a personal dilemma because I was being a scientist and studying plants and animals. So one of the things that I did while I was at university was wondering, how does my faith relate to this?
Right.
What does my faith say about plants and animals?
Right.
And then I learned that the Catholic Church had, we had the Columban missionaries who are ecologists, and they would go out as part of, they were missionaries, but they were also ecologists, and that was part of their thing, So, and it's established like they had, and then I learned that there's a lot within my faith, and then I realized that a lot of the prayers and the hymns that we sang and said as children has nature in it.
Right.
And so for me, my work with nature is part of my giving back to God and part of my faith.
Wow, that's...
And so, and this is my role. I see it more as a vocation now that my role is to make sure that the voices of those with no voices can be heard. And that's our native wildlife, because they play such an important role. If we don't look after them, then a few years down the line, our children are going to suffer from different types of diseases. And already, like you have Wildlife Conservation Society and the Ministry of Health, the program called WISH, where they're looking at how you look after catchments because of the diseases, leptospirosis, dengue. And so it's all related. If you don't look after the environment that we're in, then the environment will begin to degrade to a point where these kind of diseases, we will suffer. And so, it's not just frogs, lizards, and snakes, but what they represent. And so in our field of work in conservation, we look at we call it the umbrella species, right? So when you work with this one species, it helps all the other species. And so, for example, we talk about bats and the role that they play in eating the fruits and then spreading the fruits so that you have new trees. If you lose the bats, then you lose the trees. If you lose the trees, then you lose everything.
It's like a cascade effect,
it's a cascade effect.
Wow.
And so I don't look at just frogs, lizards, and snakes only. You look at the whole system itself.
Well, because that's interesting what you said earlier, that there's a group of you who are studying different things, but you guys are collaborating with each other.
Yeah, we've depended so long on experts to come in, and so so that's the whole reason I was part of that cohort of students that got that scholarship was to develop local expertise, and then Nature Fiji was established so that it could be locals talking to locals
That's cool,
about the issue, so that we can localize the issue and not be an American or an Australian trying to.
So has that worked? I mean,
it has. Like because we're a local organization and my team is local, and so we understand the protocols and we follow the protocols, and we are not limited by, we don't have to report to a big HQ
overseas
somewhere else. And so we are able to take our time and work at the pace that the community is ready to work with us, and or that government is ready to work with us. And
that's actually that is what I wanted to ask too, as far as, because you like you said, Nature Fiji is local, so you guys know the protocols. Working with the communities here that you guys need to go into, how has that been over the years?
Oh no, it's so. One of the first things that they did was they selected me to be basically the face of the organization. It's a Fijian face, right? They could have chosen a Kaivalani, but they specifically chose a Fijian because of the misconception that was prevalent at the time around Kaivalani and dollar signs, right? So that's why I was chosen as the face, and then our role is not to replace government or try to do stuff, but to look at government's obligations on biodiversity, look at the policies that exist, and then bridge the gap between its implementation and the communities, because majority of our land in Fiji is owned by the Matangali. So if you want to look after our resources, we have to work with the Matangali. And it's a matter of talking with them, understanding the priorities, but also coming in from a scientific perspective, and what traditional knowledge they have. And so I like to see, I call it a marrying of modern science and traditional science, and then together paving a way forward on how we can better manage the resources. Because at the end of the day, they've got to be able to put food on the table.
That's all
they've got to
the
be able to
balance,
send their children to school. And so what can we do to ensure that if they're a Yangona farmer, is it sustainable? Like at some point, will the land that he or she's farming on become degraded to the point where you can't support them anymore? So you got to think of.
Would you say, as opposed to sometimes like Western conservationism, where they're more at loggerheads with the resource owners, we do it a more Fijian way by being more collaborative?
Yeah, there's been a paradigm shift in conservation. Like in the past, way back, they would just establish a reserve and just close it down and exclude everyone. And they've learned a lot from what's happened there in the Amazon and in Africa, and they realized the need to have community integration or community participation in the management of our resources. So, and we're still also learning here in Fiji. We have forest reserves and nature reserves, and a lot of the communities are asking now, well, how can I conserve my forest? I want to keep it for my future generations. And you can log the forest, but there's the Forest Harvesting Code of Practice that you follow to make sure that you log it now, and 30 years down the line, they can log it as well. Again. So Fiji is quite fortunate because we've got a lot of scientific research that has gone into building the Fiji forest policy, the agricultural policies. But the gap is that it's a policy and then there's the people. And we don't know our rights and obligations under these policies. And so one of the roles that Nature Fiji has is to tell people, because we're local, we can say, you should know these things. And because if we don't manage it, who else will come manage it for us? If we lose the crested iguana, where else are we going to get crested iguanas? Because it's found only in Fiji. If we lose the ground frog, it's our fault because we chose to have a particular development, or we chose to, have agricultural practices that made it inhabitable for the ground frogs.
What do you think has been you guys' greatest triumph over the years for Nature Fiji?
Greatest trial.
Well, greatest triumph.
We've had many, but one that is looking at the school textbooks
Ah,
and then seeing our data and information in there. The fact
Yeah.
that you saw
Right.
cloud forest,
right.
right? You'll see the Kavauningau.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all from
That's
you
from
guys.
Nature Fiji.
Oh.
So my very first project with Nature Fiji was to do research on 50 species and then do a profile on them so that teachers could use it as a
Wow.
resource to teach about biodiversity in Fiji, because it was not in the curriculum. Like, we were learning about koala bears and tigers,
Yeah.
right? Not realizing that when you look at an endangered species, we had one right here in Fiji. We had a few right here in Fiji. So that was my first project with Nature Fiji. And we launched it on our website, and then we got the Ministry of Education vetted it back then. That was in 2008.
Wow.
And I'm happy to see that they've been taking that information into the curriculum. And then if you look at our money,
Yeah.
it's got the Kavauningau and the Bekamere. That's our board of trustees were on the committee that did that. And so a lot of those species are ones that we've been studying over the years and have been advocating. So now we can go to a classroom and say, a $5 note, that's the cooler
That's
one.
cool.
Yeah. So you kind of, it helps us just bring the message closer. So they're looking at their money, and so they have a name for
It's
it.
there.
And so once you get to know it, you form a relationship with it. And that's what we want, is for children, so that if they to form a relationship with our biodiversity, so that if they become a road engineer or a logger or a banker, and they're looking at approving development, they're going to go,
That's-
hey,
they're
wait, I
thinking
know,
about
they're
it,
gonna go,
eh?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's in the back of their mind. So what are you going to do to make sure you avoid this? So they're more conscious of the impacts that their development can have.
So you guys seem to be employing, and it's probably the best way to do it, like a long-term strategy, eh?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, obviously you do the things today, but you're also looking down the road, like with the kids and all, eh?
We have to, because that's the only way we can change our mind. It's just like the reason that we have the climate change, we have the climate crisis. It's our behavior, our throwaway culture. And so we need to change our behavior. And that goes back again to what values you're teaching the children.
It's interesting. You've been. How long have you been with Nature Fiji?
Well, since 2007, since
So
it
that's
started.
what's 15 years?
Yeah.
You're still very passionate about the whole thing, eh?
Oh yeah, because like I said, it's a vocation,
Yeah.
it's a way of life, and it's always interesting.
Yeah.
I have a bat person on my team, and a plant person, and someone who's interested in insects. And we're always, and every community that we engage is different, every government department that we engage is different. And so it's exciting.
It is, eh? Even after all this time, it's still exciting,
Yeah,
eh?
because then you think, oh gosh, okay, that way didn't go, so how are we gonna, and you meet with different personalities, some may be supportive, some may not be supportive, and so like, okay, how do we make that person like our project, see our way, but at the end of it, we're always science-fed. We make sure that the scientific data is solid, and then we can make
Right.
that.
Actually, that's something I wanted to. This is actually want to talk to someone like you. When I think of conservationists, I think of that confrontational, no, nothing can be done, blah blah blah. So you guys are obviously coming at it from a different angle, which I think is really amazing, man.
Because I think that conservation is not about just saving a species. It's about looking at what's around us. Like that mango tree, for example, it's there, and then you wonder, when is it going to fruit again? And then, and then if you see, why are there no other mango trees around it? Around it, okay, you
You've been sitting there staring at that mango tree, eh?
So it's, I think it's just that reconnection with nature. And there's a study that's been done by Nature Canada a few years ago that showed that if a human being does not have any interaction with nature, by the time they're 12 years old, they will never have that relationship with nature.
Yeah.
And, you know, you think about why there's so much depression and all that. And I can testify to that. When I'm just going to the Lesotho Park and just coming out of there, you just feel refreshed.
Yeah.
You know, and there's just something, a sense of peace that nature can give us, that a tarpaulin or, you know, if you're under a tree compared to being under a tarpaulin, you choose the tree because it's cooler.
Right.
It's just different what nature can give us, and
Wow.
and I think we're losing that that wonder of nature, you know, that awe of nature, and it's sad because then if we the adults are losing it,
the kids,
then our children are losing
we're
it.
not passing on that wonder to our kids.
Yeah. And so that's why, as an organization, we designed programs called Meet the Scientists. And so our local scientists, they all volunteer their time to take our club members out, check on the creatures in the stream. So one of my friends, Bindia, she studies all the little invertebrates in the streams. She calls them the architects of the rivers, because without them, then, you know, your stream is not well structured. And they're there because that particular tree is there, and that particular tree is there because the bat is helping it. You know, so it's all
connected.
Yeah.
What from the three, are they species?
3 groups of animals.
3 groups of animals that you study. What's the freakiest fact you know? Like off the top of your head, you know, from lizards, birds, and lizards, snakes, or frogs.
Well, there are certain lizards that, especially the ones that have been introduced, they don't need a male, so they're hermaphrodites.
Wow.
Yeah, so some of the lizards that you have inside the house, they're all female. They have eggs, but they're all female.
And they fertilize themselves.
But yeah, and that's why they're so widespread all over the world, because they don't need males to...
They got rid of the men. No wonder they seem so happy. Man, Nunia, thank you so much for coming in. I honestly, it was great talking to you, and just wishing you the best of luck with your work with Nature Fiji.
Thank you.
And for you guys as a whole, man. Because honestly, I'm kind of blown away at how you guys are going about it now. You know, because I'm not a person who keeps up to date with conservationism and all that kind of thing. But that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, and it goes back again to story time, you know, telling stories and our expression through art, and just reviving and reliving and reconnecting with nature, and then just understanding that we have some really special plants and animals here in Fiji, and they play a very important role in making sure we have clean drinking water in our taps, in the rural areas, and just if we can make that connection and keep it intact.
Out of self-interest, eh?
Yeah.
Out of self-interest.
There's the self, like my messages before would have been, no, just save the species. But as I've come to work with communities and understand that conservation, you know, I studied frogs because I didn't want to do social science, because I didn't want to have to deal with human beings. Because I think that human beings are complicated.
But then that didn't work out, eh?
Because in order to conserve, I have to converse.
Right.
I have to converse with the people so that they're
on board.
Are on board, so that they feel.
Wow.
So that they are empowered, they have the capacity, and they can look after the very things that I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
So instead of going away from human beings, I've gone back into it. And I think it's amazing because and I'm always amazed at the level of support from the community. When I go into the communities and they just go, gosh, I wish you'd told us.
See, that's it. Well,
that connection between the cloud forest and the so I wish someone had told us this a long time ago. And that's why we wanted it to be in the curriculum, because you learn it in the curriculum. And so when we come in and talk, the kids are able to make the connections right away. And so my son is in kindergarten and he's learning about leaves. He told me leaves are the kitchen. The sun cooks the food in the leaves, you know. And then I go, cool. That's great. Yeah, so.
Cool.
Yeah.
Man, but thank you so much for coming in today. And,
No problem.
and honestly, like I said, man, I don't know. Didn't know what I was expecting from this episode, you know? I just thought we'd be talking about reptiles, but the points you're making are amazing. And thank you so much for watching another episode of Legend FM Mix. We're going to finish this in the traditional manner
All right.
of having a billow. Yeah? We'll see you on the next one. Take care.